Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our session on living with bladder cancer, your psychological wellness, which is being delivered by clinical psychologist Mike Ars. My name's Jackie O'Kelly, and I'm one of the patient support officers here at Action Bladder Cancer UK, along with my colleague, Di Cook, who will also be involved in the running of the session, and she'll be dealing with the questions at the end of the presentation. The session will last for around 40, maybe 45 minutes. And during that time, we'll have the question and answer function open. So please do feel free to post questions throughout the time that Mike is speaking, um, including if you have any technical problems along the way as well. So there are a lot of people on the session, and it may well be the case that we don't get to answer all of your questions. And if that happens, what we'll do is try and group them into themes. But please do be aware that you can still get in touch with us here at Action Bladder Cancer UK after the session, either by phoning us or emailing us, and all our contact details are on the website. Please do be aware that we'll also be recording this session and we'll be posting on our website in the near future. But rest assured, as this is a webinar, your cameras aren't shown, and so you won't be on camera during the presentation. Also, that the question and answer transcript, that won't be appearing on the recording as well. So on that note, can I introduce you to clinical psychologist Mike Ars, who I'll hand over to now. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much for the, I'm really grateful for the chance to make this presentation, for the chance to talk about the psychology of serious cancer and also most importantly, serious treatment. But I need to be very clear at the start is that the psychology of anything actually is not clear. It's very fuzzy because people are incredibly variable, diverse, and there is also the element of time. So nothing that I'm going to talk about today is going to be all that exact because you can't be. You can't pin people down. And nothing that I'm going to talk about today will be inevitable or compulsory. It's just possible, it's a risk, and it's normal. One of the things I think I want to emphasize the most is that this is normal, but critically, it's not all that pleasant. And that's why let me just share my presentation. There we go. Really need to amend the title. It's not really the normal psychology of cancer treatment and recovery. It's the normal unpleasant psychology of cancer treatment and recovery. I'm going to be focusing very much on the unpleasantness of it, the normal unpleasant of it. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't, they're not so much pleasant, but aren't some positive or transformative elements of the experience. People talk about having quite an overwhelming experience sometimes of the care and the love that they get from people. They learn what they value more than anything else. So they do learn a lot. People do describe that. But to be honest, that's reasonably easy to cope with. It's the unpleasantness, which is worth focusing on because it's not really talked about very much. It's not that easy to manage, but it is very normal. And the psychological impact and legacy of diagnosis and treatment is just as unpleasant as the medicine. The reason why I've been very, very pleased to give this presentation is just this one phrase that came from someone I worked with years ago. It's a patient we've had years and years ago. I spent all of my career in hospitals working with chronic conditions, trauma conditions, and cancer conditions. And certainly in the early days, people talked a lot about how they just didn't know what's coming and what to expect from a psychological point of view. And our brains really like to make sense. They really like to understand what's going on. So it does help to know what's coming or why we feel the way we do. Every now and again, I'd like you to ask yourself the question, what would any other animal that's wounded like I am right now, what would they do? How would they react? And you'll find there are huge similarities between how you feel on your bad days and how any creature would feel that had been assaulted, poisoned, or scared in the same way. It does help to know what's coming. It's not particularly easy, though, to pin it all down. One of the things that is way more critical than it's given credit for is just the quiet passage of time. And cumulative duress is very important. the way small things build up over time is very important, and probably more of a factor than the one-off big bang of the diagnosis. It's the way we live our lives every day that has a much more significant impact on our quality of life than anything else. So I'm going to be focusing a lot on the little things, the invisible things. They're quite difficult to put into words. And they're the main reason why when somebody asks you on some days, you know, why do you feel rubbish today? You can't quite put it into words, because one of the things that ticks along, and we don't really notice it very much, is just time and the accumulation of time. The drip, 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 drip experience of everyday life, the little things of everyday life, can have a huge impact. And it may be that the reason you feel the way you do today is not because of anything that happened yesterday. It's not necessarily because of anything that happened, any one thing that happened, but the fact that you've been living with this for X months, for a while now. It's I couldn't help but notice today that I was in a much better mood because it's sunny and there's not a cloud in the sky. And I felt an awful lot better than I did after 2 months of rain and cloud and cold. The small things do accumulate and they have a much bigger impact. A huge impact. No. A huge impact on our experience, and one that's underestimated and not really given the credit it deserves. So please, if you are going to think about your quality of life, please focus on the small everyday things rather than just the big one-off things. And again, I repeat, please bear in mind that it's not compulsory to feel everything that I'm going to describe. It's not inevitable, but it is possible and it is normal. The other thing is it's slightly more complex. It's not simple than we'd like it to be. Most critically as well, there's a huge difference between the private and the public. What we show is not necessarily how we feel, and that's never more true than in serious illness. A lot of people going through treatment, recovering from treatment, when they're out and about, if you ask them how they are, they'll say they're fine and they'll sort of move on. We did the opportunity to sort of talk quite honestly about how we feel in the world of cancer is actually quite rare. It's quite small, and it's very social. It's what we say and how we behave depends on who's around and where we are. What you say in front of your children, your grandchildren, what you say in front of the meat counter at Sainsbury's, these are all very different situations. And the number of times when you can have a long, meaningful conversation about how you feel, it's tiny. It's very, very small. And the number of times when, and even if that came along, you might not feel like it that particular day. Sometimes it can very quickly, you get to the point where you don't really want to talk much about it at all, but you don't really want it to be ignored. And then it becomes, then the other factor comes in, which we have to accept, that socially, our society, our culture has a problem with cancer and people with cancer. And you'll have become very aware that you have a story that not everyone you know can cope with. And so that makes it quite complicated. It has quite a difference there. And I'm really going to be focusing on the private experience. What people don't see, what's behind the mask. And but at all times, the assumption is going to be, we must remember that socially, it's not that easy. People can be afraid, people can be okay about it, people can be afraid and sort of, they can offer unsolicited advice, which is the last thing you ever need. Please bear in mind that, you know, no treatment, no diagnosis, no opinion. It's up to you. And also be aware that you will at times, there is a risk at times that you'll feel as if you're under slight pressure to tell a happier story or be positive when maybe you don't really feel like it. So it is complicated. Our social, our situation, our relationships are the source of our biggest support and also sometimes our biggest problems. So I hope I've made the case that it's very fuzzy, it's very complicated, but at the same time, it is very normal. But please, if you ever sat there thinking, I can't really put it into words, then you get it. Because if you like things to be exact, if you like things to be straightforward, well, then don't study the psychology of anything, because it's you can't pin people down. And there can, most importantly, there can be a huge difference between how they feel privately and how they feel in public. Some people will listen to this and go, well, I'm fine, and that's great. But other people, it's not always the case. I'm going to go through a few psychological symptoms and signs now, which are the major clinical themes, the major themes that diagnosis and treatment can do to us. They can be part of the legacy. And they're in no particular order, but this one is, the first one is probably the least avoidable. Most of us will get quite a foggy brain for various times, because the treatment in particular will put a major demand upon the brain, will be put what we call a big burden upon the brain. And the first thing out the window is concentration, attention span, particularly word finding, and maybe not your old memory, but your current and your working memory can get very foggy. You can remember how to tie your shoelaces in the dark, not a problem. You can remember the lyrics from a song you learnt when you were 8, but can you remember where you put your glasses 3 minutes ago? Can you remember why you're in the room at all? Because you came out of the front room, you went into the kitchen to get something, and you don't know. Can you remember walking out of your outpatient clinic, where the hell the car is? All that immediate stuff that relies on our everyday cognitive function, our ability to think, our ability to process information, it gets very foggy. And it can take quite a while for that to lift. And it may not completely lift, to be honest, because an awful lot of people, the legacy is reasonably chronic and you've got things to deal with. So please don't give yourself a hard time if you feel like you've got memory like a sieve, if you feel like your concentration is just not what it was. Maybe you read quite long books, quite lengthy, quite complicated books, and maybe you don't feel like that anymore. Maybe you used to quite like long movies, and now not so much, because our ability to process information, or what we call our cognitive ability, our ability to think, it gets really interrupted and messed up by diagnosis and treatment. And we can function and we can do things, but not all the time. And the trouble is with that is you realize how much you need it on an everyday basis, how helpful it is to be able to remember whether you lock the front door, how helpful it is to be able to remember when your appointments are, and how much of a fool you can feel when you can't do that. And it can be quite a factor in people's low mood sometimes, and frustration and irritation. It's not necessarily the pain, it's just the fact that you just can't get your brain to work. It can drive you crazy. And it's quite a factor in our identity and our general pride and our dignity, to be honest. None of us like feeling like a fool. But if you've gone through some of the things that you have to go through with cancer treatment and have to live with on a daily basis, then you can't keep your attention span, your concentration span, switching attention, remembering words, and all that kind of stuff. Well, I hope I made my point, is that you can't have treatment and a short-term memory, one or the other. Okay, so please be patient with your brain. Similarly, because of the sustained and prolonged kind of experience, you will experience fatigue to some degree. I'm not talking about being tired, I'm talking about fatigue. Fatigue is where you just don't want to do anything. Not only does your brain shut down, but you're just exhausted. And you've been fatigued in the past, pre sort of diagnosis, but fatigue is where you just, every cell feels tired and you're bone tired. And you sat there thinking, well, if the house was on fire now, I don't know whether I'd get out in time. It's particularly acute in the early process of recovery from treatment. But if your treatment goes on, or if there's a legacy, then there is a risk that it can come and go. I think it is linked quite a lot to sleep disturbance. But even if you have a good night's sleep, the thing about fatigue is you tend to wake up with it as well as go to bed. And it tends to be something which, to some degree, because it's a very primitive defensive mechanism, it's basically your very ancient brain saying, I want you to go to the back of the cave and I want you to curl up and recover. And I'm going to do that because I don't speak a language. I just speak a feeling and an instinct. I just want you to find a quiet place, curl up and hide. And I'm going to give you the motivation to do that by making you feel tired, making you feel fatigued rather than just tired. Please bear in mind that one of the reasons we know it's fatigue is that willpower just doesn't work. Willpower will buy you an hour. It'll get you through a wedding reception, but you will pay for it that evening and the next day. The only way to manage fatigue is to gently pace yourself and to ease yourself through it. You've got to respect it, and please don't turn it into a test of character or a test of willpower, because that never works. But it is inevitable that, and you can already see the unpleasantness emerging, can't you? It is inevitable that there'll be a certain degree of fatigue as a result of treatment. And I do believe on the whole that this is a very, very primitive impulse, an instinct, which is to try and withdraw to the back of the cave and just try and give yourself the best chance of recovering. Rumination and worry is another classic. Some of you may have been used to it. They've always been a worrier. Others may have never worried, but it's quite common, certainly in the first couple of years post-diagnosis, for the brain, having said it's fatigued, to also ruminate. Ruminate means you just go round and round and round, thinking about things and worrying about things with no useful resolution or constructive resolution. It is quite natural to worry because it's not irrational, but it's not particularly pleasant and it's not particularly helpful. I wish there was a good psychological hack for this, but there isn't. Again, it is something which does settle down in time. It is something which doesn't really benefit from engaging in it. It is best to take a more acceptance-based, or the modern phrase of sort of take a more mindful approach to rumination and try not to almost fan the flames really by thinking about it and trying to convince you. Try not to control it. Try not to live with it, but don't be too surprised if at times it can be triggered quite quickly. You can feel as if a lot of people will say, oh, I thought I was over all this. And then I found, oh, yesterday afternoon, I was just whittling about this particular thing. Well, the brain doesn't necessarily forget completely. And you have made progress and you are over it. It's just we're prone to being triggered when we've been through something as serious as you've been through. And rumination can be part of it. If it becomes dominant and disabling, I really would recommend you ask for help. But please don't think that help is necessarily simple or easy, because a big part of dealing with worry is the same as dealing with bereavement, which is you've got to give yourself time. And please understand that it is very normal. As you can tell, these are big hitting feelings that people get. Foggy brain, fatigue, and rumination. These are not easy things. And but none of them particularly benefit well from trying to just control them through willpower. It's best to understand them. The other thing that can happen, particularly more in social situations, but not always, is that you can find yourself prone to, I think as part of the fatigue thing, prone to sort of slipping into a bit of a dissociative bubble on a regular basis as you get tired. Dissociation is when you just slightly or a lot, you just become cut off from everyday reality. And people talk about it being sort of in a space helmet looking out, looking through a goldfish tank, but you're just in a bubble and you're not really paying attention to anybody else. You're not really listening to anybody, but you are there. And it's a slight more like a trance, really. And in a way, it's your brain saying, I'm tired. If you're not going to leave physically, I'm going to leave. I'm going to take a break and I'm going to go into a little bit of a trance because I need a rest. Or maybe at its worst, things are just very unbearable and I'm just switching off for now. Usually it's just a sign that you've done a bit too much, particularly socially. I urge you to pace people more than you pace anything else. You can see in this picture, you can be in a room full of people who you've known since you were born, and you can love all of them dearly. But because of what you've been through, your main feeling could be, oh, please, I just want you all to go, because you've been there long enough. You will find your appetite for people, your appetite for socializing will shrink. And sometimes it will feel like it's evaporated. Please don't think that's unusual. Please think that's just part of the need to withdraw and to sort of rest. And it's a way of social pacing in particular. I would urge, start with ones and twos, but also don't hang out with people you don't like. Might be tricky if you're related to them, but and be very careful to pace yourself socially, because nothing will wear you out more than people, relating to people, talking to people. And you will have a very clear idea of who you like and who you don't. You will have quite an idea. And you may even feel like you've got a little bit more assertion these days, slightly about what you want to do and what you don't. But particularly socially, be aware that your brain is working hard managing recovery, managing living with the legacy. And so it won't be quite so interested in socializing as it was. And if you do too much socially, don't be too surprised if you go into a little bit of a bubble, if you switch off, or if you simply get to the point where you want to leave, or you have that feeling that you don't even want to go, because your social appetite will shrink. And it's important to manage that. And it's important, I think, to respect that and not make that person do what they literally can't do because it's too much. So that dissociation, it's very, very, it's what the brain does to protect itself. It'll shut down if it needs a rest and it isn't getting one. And do pace a lot of things in your life. Don't give them up, but pace them. But in particular, pace people. And only do the kind of things that you want to do, and be careful not to do them for too long or longer than you can manage. The other thing, of course, is that it's very difficult, even if you've got a mild headache, to be in a good mood. Even mild illnesses make us irritable, but it's I seem to be having trouble moving the slide on now. There we go. Sorry about that. You can't have treatment and a long fuse. You can't have pain and a long fuse. You can't have fatigue and a long fuse. And you can't work a long day and have a longer fuse at the end of the day than at the beginning. You will have a shorter fuse, and it may not be visible. It may not be particularly noticeable to other people because you may just turn it on yourself. But you may well find that because of the cumulative thing, what kicks it off may be irrelevant. Just because the dishwasher's out of salt, that's what triggers you off to get sort of angry or tearful. But it's you can't have treatment and a longer fuse. If we were to do to any kind of medium-sized or large dog what we do to people in hospital, then you wouldn't want to go. That dog would not be safe. It's difficult because anger can be quite destructive, but it is perfectly understandable. Similarly, you can just be a lot more emotional. You may have always been very emotional, and now you realize you're even more emotional, or you may not have been very emotional at all, and now you realize that you are, because that is part of the legacy. It doesn't just mean that you're necessarily sort of more anxious about things. You just can generally be more emotional in general. You can be walking along a river and see 12 ducklings and be overwhelmed by that. But what you will find is that you are metaphorically thin-skinned, not necessarily literally. Your skin's fine, but you are much more emotional than you were before, and much more psychological, because that is part of the trauma element of treatment. Part of the threat is that you're in a state of what we call dysregulation or hyperarousal, where you're just so much more reactive than we were before in different ways. This is very personal and this could be very private, but it is possible that for a while you just find that you are extremely reactive to things, and that's exhausting as well. Everything that I've described so far, as we go through it, it is tiring just to think about it, and this may be one of the reasons why you just want to withdraw from the world much more. And that, in many ways, that's what every creature does when it's wounded. This is what we do. We withdraw. And just because we can do these things, just because we can have treatment, doesn't mean we get it for free. Our brains, they evolved, and they haven't really changed for millions of years, and this is all new to them. They don't really know what's going on. So we can get very primitive reactions that can be quite difficult to understand. But when you think about it as being just dealing with the hard work of managing the everyday threat and duress of diagnosis and treatment, then it makes sense to me. Similarly, your approach to the outside world can be matched. It's possible, it's not compulsory, but it's possible that you can become a lot more withdrawn, a lot more conservative, and a lot more fearful of the outside world, particularly people or things. Quite often people say, oh, everybody's saying, when treatment's over or when you're feeling better, we'll have a big party, and you'll go, your main instinct is, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. That's the last thing I want to do. You may find that if the phone goes, you don't really want to pick it up. You may find, well, back in the day when there was post, that if a letter comes through the post box, instead of thinking, oh, that's exciting, what's in it? You may find that you're not excited about it and you don't want to know. We can get more withdrawn. We can get more, we can see the world as a more demanding rather than sort of stimulating place. And that's because, again, we're carrying a wound. We are dealing with something. And for some people, that can be quite difficult. None of these things are difficult to manage, and they can undermine our confidence in ourselves, and they can undermine our identity. But if you think about it, I mean, it's almost inevitable that any creature that's been wounded or poisoned or going through a toxic sort of situation is going to be defensive. I promise you I'm coming to the end of this sort of list at the moment, but all of this tends to combine with an assault on our self-confidence. I think young people call it feeling diminished, which is a word that may apply here, but all of this tends to erode and undermine all of these little things, because we've all been brought up to never complain, you know, and be grateful, be grateful, be grateful. And you can feel under quite a lot of pressure to be positive and to be grateful, which in actual fact, what you are is knackered, and what you are is lower in confidence that you've ever been. You can't think, I don't want to do anything. All of this can converge on just making us feel lower in confidence, less comfortable, less positive about ourselves. And that's all part of this sort of drip, drip, drip accumulation. It's not compulsory, but it is quite hard at times to avoid completely. And of course, this can affect our relationships. Cancer affects families, neighborhoods, couples, not just cells. And it can pretty much leave everything, doesn't leave anything untouched. Getting back to all of your relationships will change to some degree, maybe not barely at all, but some, particularly the strong feelings tend to come out in stronger relationships. And certainly our intimate sexual relationships, libido can be one of the first things out the window and one of the last things to come back. Stress on the partner, the stress on the person, it can just make this thing all very difficult. And our relationships can, on the one hand, become stronger and stronger, but on the other hand, at other times they can become colder and more distant, and it can feel as if everything's changed. And you do need time. Families need time, couples need time in order to manage the legacy, because it will affect everybody. It will affect your nearest and dearest, and they're the ones that really matter. But I mean, some people you know will step up and surprise you. Some people you know will flee. Some people you know will try and tell you what to do. Other people won't. And you will have a very strong idea, notion that you've got a story which not everybody you meet can bear to hear, and you learn to read them. It is a big deal, sort of socially. We could do a whole session just on the social sort of side, but it's quite difficult certainly particularly with the legacy of treatment, because one thing's for certain is I really don't think you can go back to doing everything the way you did. You have to pace yourself, and that's not just physical. You have to pace yourself mentally, but within your relationships, please pace yourself, and please talk to the important people. Again, that's sort of run through some of the major themes that amount to the normal psychological impact and legacy. Taken together, it can be quite overwhelming, but please understand that they are all natural, all normal, and all put a significant burden on the brain, and the brain will do its best to survive. Most of the brain is unconscious, so it'll get on with it, and you'll just watch it happen and sort of manage it. But none of these things are unnatural, abnormal, but they are new to us in a way, because there's I mean, you know, it's only this century and the last one where we've had all these kind of treatments. And our brain evolved a long time ago to deal with the things in a different way. But please be patient with the brain. What helps now, please don't buy any snake oil. Please don't think that simplistic things kind of help, because if they helped, then believe me, the NHS would give it. All of these things are manageable. They certainly do ease over time, although time has its own sort of impact. But please don't think that there's a simple thing. You're not doing anything wrong. Please understand that what helps to begin with is to understand that this is normal, and I'm not doing anything wrong to feel this way, but it is unpleasant and it can cause secondary problems. So please be I'm going to be quite fuzzy with the themes, but please be patient. This is the point where we start to talk about, if you knew someone else that was going through all this, you would be very patient, you'd be very respectful, you'd be very understanding, and that's what they would need. So please be patient. Be patient. If you be patient with your brain, because it takes a while, and you can't just get a software hack for this. You can't do this overnight. Please be patient and take your time. But most critically, please be flexible. Please don't turn this into a test of willpower, a test of character. Please make changes to reflect the changes that have happened and continue to happen. Flexibility is difficult for some of us, but it's the one thing that the people that do better have in common. It's their ability to sort of manage things and make changes. I'll explain a little bit more in a minute. Critically, though, as well, patience, flexibility, and self-compassion. Please audit the way you relate to yourself and the way you treat yourself and the people you love. And just double check that you're treating yourself with the same level of compassion and respect that you would employ to treat someone else in an exact situation. Please check whether you're treating yourself with the same level of compassion and understanding that you would demand for every other person, even strangers that you don't know, that have been through what you know they've been through because you've been through it. There is a risk, there's a high risk that we can rub salt in the wound by, instead of being self-compassionate, getting quite self-attacking, getting quite low, getting quite irritable and turning a lot of that anger on ourselves, because frustration is inevitable, irritability is inevitable, and sometimes even losing the hope can happen to a certain degree. But there's a massive contrast between, it's clear as a bell, really, when I ask people, you know, what would you want for someone else who was in an identical situation like this? And there's a wave of charity and compassion. So please, when I'm going back to that drip, 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 think about, and please be aware of the very attitude you have towards yourself. Is it patient? Is it flexible? And is it respectful? Respectful of both who you are and what you've been through. Again, this is fuzzy, but I hope that makes sense. Just to reinforce my point about flexibility, when dealing with difficult events, flexibility wins out over rigidity. Rigid things shatter. I'm sure most of you have heard someone who's pregnant for the first time saying, oh, this baby isn't going to change my life. And you just smile and go, oh, yes, it will. You better be flexible. But a better example is to ask you, what survives best in a hurricane? A hurricane is the most destructive force on this planet. Well, one of them, outside of volcanoes, I suppose. The most destructive weather force. And what survives it the best? Oops. Well, it's a palm tree. Palm trees survive hurricanes. Not always, but most of the time. Every other tree doesn't. Buildings don't, but palm trees do, because they bend. And please bear in mind that you may not think of a palm tree as a very impressive tree. You may not think of a palm tree as your top 5 most impressive trees, but it's the only thing that survives a hurricane of that size. And I hope I'm making my point, which is flexibility in the face of this level of duress is quite important. And it's what the people who do well have in common. The other thing people have in common is self-compassion. Now, what I'm talking about here is how comfortable you are at giving yourself full moral permission to rest, to do nothing, to kind of take it easy, to pace yourself and do less, or whether you're putting yourself under pressure, under some kind of tyranny, to be positive, to be busy. And not everybody can do this, what's in this picture. Not everybody can sit back and go, I'm just going to pause. And what you'll learn about yourself when you go through treatment for serious illness is your capacity for feeling comfortable, feeling secure about taking time out and resting. And if there's a massive contrast between how comfortable you are about telling someone else, you just go and have an hour, and how difficult you would find doing that yourself, please remember that the advice you gave the other person was good advice. And this is not a directive saying you must sit in a deck chair. This is a thought experiment, really, asking you to think, how good am I at affording myself complete moral permission to pace myself to rest as part of my recovery? So please, if you one sentence, if you can remember one slide or just use one sentence, please ask yourself just once a day for 10 seconds, what guidance would a wise, feisty, compassionate friend give me in managing the everyday? Yeah. Compassionate friend because they want what's best for you, but they've got to be quite feisty because they may have to tell you something that you won't find that easy to hear, or you might quite annoy you. You need a feisty, compassionate friend, because if you haven't had a shower for 3 weeks, someone needs to come around and tell you you need a shower. And we only tend to listen to our compassionate friends because we know they love us. But that, if there was a psychological intervention, then just ask yourself each day, what guidance would a wise, feisty, compassionate friend give me? It's so much easier to think about what would someone else advise me, or what if I was the wise, feisty, compassionate friend, what would I say to this other person? And just think about it, really contemplate. Your situation is very unique and very personal. So there's not going to be 12 steps. There's not going to be do this, this works for everybody. It's going to be, what would someone who really knows you and really wants what's best for you say to you? And then you'll learn the other thing about managing the legacy, which is how comfortable are you receiving help or asking for help? Because it may be that the rumination, the anger, maybe the anxiety, the emotionality, maybe that some aspect of it is really difficult and you do need to ask for help. And what we know is that a lot of people, particularly with all the press about the NHS, they think the NHS is busy, blah, blah. But also a lot of people they don't like asking for help. They feel uncomfortable. But please don't listen to what everybody said. The NHS is not broken. Well, cancer clinics are not broken. Nurse specialists are not broken. They want you to call. They want to help you. They need help. But also your friends want to help you. And one of the things you will learn is how flexible you are. You'll learn how comfortable you are with pacing and doing less. And you'll also learn how comfortable you are with letting people help you. Some people will find they're really comfortable with it and they love it. But most of us find it's slightly awkward. But do think about this, because and both socially and with informal help or with formal professional help, please do consider asking for help. Please pay attention to the small things. The everyday things. If you were to decide to make a difference to your quality of life, I really urge you to look at the small things, the little things, the everyday things that will make your everyday life a little bit easier. Please understand that the brain and the body thrives in a socially safe, supported situation. So please do everything you can to make sure that the people that matter to you understand what's going on. And please understand that social safety, feeling comfortable with people, is really crucial to our health. It's a big statement, and it's quite fuzzy, but we do best in socially, practically, and emotionally supportive sort of situations. I mean, to be honest, a bad team is worse than no team at its extreme. But what I'm talking about is, please seek help from people. Please, it doesn't mean that you can't be helpful to other people as well. You know, your world of sort of giving and being useful is not over. But I hope the phrase social safety means something to you, because please seek it out. Please understand that the brain, the mind, and the body all feel better in a socially safe and supportive sort of environment. But bear in mind that your brain and your appetite and your capacity for people will have shrunk. So be comfortable. Try your best to be comfortable with that feeling. Do go gently, but do go. Please, please be careful not to withdraw too much. But whatever you do, please don't do it like a bullet a gate. Please don't turn it into a test of character, like I've said before, a test of willpower. I mean, gently for you might not be gently for other people, but don't overtrain if you're trying to get back to things, because you will be more prone to relapses and fatigue. But do everything slowly. This won't necessarily last forever, but please respect what you've been through and go gently. But do things, because at the other extreme, being over withdrawn can cause its own problems. And please, on a daily basis, please act out of benign self-compassion and watch the way you talk to yourself. It doesn't really matter what we say to ourselves. It's the tone that is important. And please ask yourself on a regular basis, would I let someone talk to someone I love the way I'm talking to myself at the moment? Please watch the tone. Please talk to yourself in a compassionate way, a patient way, because the drip, drip, drip impact of your attitude towards yourself over time is important. Please be that feisty, compassionate friend. And finally, I hope that a bit like today, I hope the weather that you're getting today is a bit like the weather I've got, where that will be, and let's look forward to a future where you can sit at the beach on a blue sky. The sky will be blue, it will be quieter, and hopefully this feeling of managing the impact, managing the legacy, I'm not going to say this too shall pass, but it can be managed, and that there's a reason to do all these things. But please base your recovery on a benign sense of self-compassion, on a flexibility, on a level of impatience and a level of patience, and an understanding of that the normal psychology, particularly of cancer treatment, is just as unpleasant as the medicine. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. I'd like to sort of just hand back to Di, if that's okay.
Many thanks, Mike. That was really interesting. We do have some questions, but if you do have a question that you want to post now, please put it in the question and answer box. And also, if, as Jackie mentioned at the beginning, if you think of a question after the session, please email us and we will pass that on to Mike. We'll be putting our contact details up at the end, so you can get our email address then. So, Mike, we do have some questions.
Yeah.
This one is, do you have any coping exercises for when thoughts spiral?
Well, specifically, I think if it's not so much the thoughts, we don't really control the feelings that come in. We don't really control the thoughts, but we can maybe wrangle the way we think about how we think, the way we feel about how we feel. And I don't want to sort of dismiss the whole area of psychological intervention, but if you can not panic about your panic, if you can try not to control your thoughts and your feelings, but try to observe them and recognize that that's what they are, and almost say to yourself, I've been here before. And if you can, do your best to, in many ways, almost replicate that squeeze on the shoulder that a friend would say, easy, easy. Well, okay, take it easy. And believe me, watch your breathing. I did wonder about whether I put it in slide, but I didn't want to have too many slides. But sometimes it can be helpful just to check your breathing, make sure you breathe out for a little bit longer than you breathe in. And we don't get to choose when these spiraling thoughts come in, but we can, as soon as we can say, I'm spiraling, this is what I'm doing. And if you can have a little ritual that you do, but please accept the unpleasantness. Please say, this is what happens to people in my position, and try and be that compassionate friend who wouldn't say anything, would just squeeze your shoulder and say, okay, let's ride this out. But the fact is, people may try and pretend there are no clever sentences that can control sort of our feelings. But the more you try and argue with somebody, the more they'll argue back, to be honest. But do see it spiraling, do see it as literally a rush of adrenaline, a rush of blood, and do your best to find a quiet place. Be careful not to get too self-attacky, and imagine, or even how, that a compassionate friend would just squeeze you on the shoulder and say, easy. As it's not going to be instantaneous, because once adrenaline gets in the system, it likes to hang around, it likes to stick around, but at least you feel like you're getting there. But when you are spiraling, the sooner you can say to yourself, here we go, I'm spiraling, the sooner we can ride it out. It's inevitable to me. This stuff is too serious. It's too big a deal. Everyone's going to spiral. It's going to happen. Yeah. But try not to spiral about your spiraling, in a way. But if you do find that you can't, it may be that is where you could ask for help and work with somebody on just basic things. Yeah. I think even if you're alone, imagine you're not alone, and imagine what that other person would say. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. And the other one is one around fatigue. I worry about my partner. He's very caring, but I feel so fatigued sometimes. What can we do together?
Yeah, that's absolutely crucial, because there'll be times when the partner's fatigued, but critically, the most important thing is to say that fatigue is a real thing. We've got to respect this. And so we've only got 12 spoons a day. If I have a hot shower, that's down to 9. If we have a row, that's down to 7. We've only got a certain number of things. So for all couples, for anybody that's going through treatment, have a kind of, what are our priorities? What are we going to do? Because we can't do everything. It's that definitely acceptance focus, which is however hard we try. And it's almost like sometimes like you think, cancer's trying to break people up. Yeah. Do your best on a good day when both of you aren't feeling angry to talk about what do we do? How are we going to prioritize my limited energy? Yeah. And how are we going to do it? And have a collective plan. I mean, maybe the problem with psychologists is that we're too individual. Maybe I should have started by saying, do all of this with the important people in your life. Have these conversations with the important people in your life. But again, a bit like the spiraling, it's inevitable. There'll be days when I don't want to go to the beach. I don't even want to go to saying, I don't even get out of bed. And so what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And certainly with treatment, have regular blood tests, check your iron, check your thyroid, because don't assume that this is just duress. Always check your bloods. Yeah. But I would definitely, on a good day when both of you are feeling all right, say, not forever, but just for 20 minutes, can we just talk about what we're going to do, not about cancer, but about fatigue, because it ain't going away.
Yeah.
But start with normal. Yeah. It's the only thing you can guarantee, the only thing I'm really certain about is that if you try and fight fatigue, it will win.
Yeah.
You'll get more tired and more angry and more irritable. And so it's the we in the statement, but fatigue is real.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've had one that might be a little bit harder to answer, actually, but someone's posted in the chat box. Can you suggest issues that are specific to bladder cancer and its treatment?
Yeah. I think, well, the one thing about bladder and bowel is just simply the social stigma. It's not well, no cancer is easy to talk about at all. But bladder and bowel, as a society, the bowel and the bladder. I mean, there was for a long time, the tabloids wouldn't publish anything about bladders and bowel because of the social. It's the word stigma, just the general sort of problem. So I do think one of the it's not so much unspoken within the field of sort of bladder cancer, but it's more the kind of how you feel out and about in the world. Because if you have any issues with incontinence or just difficulties in that area, you become highly aware of embarrassment and humiliation. You know exactly where all the good toilets are, and if you're out of your comfort zone, you don't know where the toilets are. It's an issue. And rather than go, oh, for God's sake, just cowboy up and get on with it, please do understand that if you're going to go somewhere, make sure that your risk of embarrassment is do everything you can do to manage that, and as if you were important and as if it was important, because sometimes you don't get much notice, and sometimes I do remember once accident. I was on a train coming into Paddington Station, and someone spilt a hot chocolate in my lap. So I then decided, right, so I had a big brown stain on my trousers, and I decided, because I'm a psychologist, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to see how long I can walk down the street with a big stain on my trousers and feel comfortable about it. And it turns out I couldn't. Turns out I couldn't. It's ridiculous. Don't fight it in that way. So the social situations to do with embarrassment, humiliation, and generally just are coping with what isn't anything, not personal, with our cultural attitudes towards that is quite important. Also, the other thing is you may have a more sustained legacy. You may have longer term sort of issues. And there may be a lot more pain than in other areas. So I just think it ranks as one of the more demanding conditions as it goes. The only thing I would say is, I think a lot of the symptoms can be more intense, but also there's this social side, the risk of humiliation and all that kind of stuff. And we all like to think we're above that, but we're not. We're absolutely not. And my experience is that a lot of people, whether or not they go out that day, doesn't, the fatigue might be fine. It's whether they feel safe. Yeah.
Absolutely. We've got one about feeling guilty being unwell, and trying to act normal around family and friends, and how to deal with guilt.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's inevitable because, again, we're back to culture, not personal. Because usually 6 to 8 weeks after treatment ends, the assumption is, everything's back to normal. And then we realize that our identity, we learn a lot about ourselves. We learn what our identity is based on. And a lot of people don't like the fact that they can't go back to what they were before. And with the strong feelings tend to come out with strong relationships. But with guilt, you just got to talk. You got to talk to the people about the. You have to talk to everybody, because the number of people who really matter is quite small. And if it's overwhelming, again, you never know, it might be quite helpful to seek a bit of help and have a few personal sessions. You'd be surprised how psychological sessions, they don't have to go on for very long. You know, they don't have to last very long. But to be honest, if you did, they would still be saying, how can we set it up so you talk to the people that love you and you love? Yeah. But it's inevitable that guilt is a massive part of the human condition. Please be very careful and think about it, and don't let it interrupt. And allow a feisty, compassionate friend to have an opinion.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah.
One last question, and you touched on a little bit about changing relationships with your partner.
Yeah.
How do I reconnect with my partner?
Yeah, slowly, gently. Start small, but talk to them, include them. I would do it little and often. I would only do it on a good day. I would book it in, and I would dare to speak about it. But make sure the partner understands that the brain isn't interested.
Yeah.
The brain does not want. The brain is, the brain is done, and that I think it's the libido in particular, or intimacy, first thing out the window, last thing to come back. Yeah. Because we don't need it. We don't need it. We can feel horribly unattractive. We're back to humiliation again. It can crush us, absolutely. But then the biggest test of patience will be getting back to that kind of sexual relationship. Because on the one hand, you could have a powerful feeling that you've never been more loved, but you've never felt less sexy. Yeah. And then guilt isn't too far away again, is it? It's tricky. It's tricky. Yeah. But a lot of people can say, well, why is this happening now? Because, I've been at this 18 months, and well, it's because it's the drip, drip, drip. It's the erosion. Yeah. But maybe it's true. It is true that in order to make a bit of progress, you've got to have those difficult, awkward conversations.
Yeah.
But it's real, and only have them on a good day. Don't have them for very long, and expect them to be clumsy.
Yeah.
And expect, be open to funky new things.
We've just had a couple more. Are you okay for time?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
We've had one that I can quickly answer. Would it be possible to have a copy or access the webinar again? We are recording the webinar, as Jackie mentioned, so we will be putting it on our website. So yeah, if you keep an eye on the website, and please just email us if you're not seeing it, and we can get that to you. And then we've got one that's just come through as well. After 3 TURBT procedures in the past 12 months, I've realized that bladder cancer isn't going away. So I think obviously that question is more about how do you deal with ongoing treatment, and that it's going to be a life in.
Yeah. Well done, Jim, because that's by far the best way. To be honest, even if the cancer has gone away, it hasn't gone away psychologically. And that phrase, once you've had the diagnosis, once you've had cancer, you've always had cancer. And even in the cancers where you've been told it's never coming back, you can be triggered 5 years later, because the brain is on a better safe than sorry sort of bias, and is always alert and always kind of ready, always saying what's going on. But yeah, and it is the third one. Yeah. First one, oh, second one, third one, oh, this is life now. Yeah. But please don't think that that doesn't mean that because it's taken time, that there's always potential. There's always for feeling more at peace with it. There's always potential. But there is that bereavement, and there is that quiet kind of, oh God, yeah, this is part of my life now. Yeah. And to be honest, you hear that in diabetes, you hear it in cardiac, post-heart. You hear that when, my body's different now. Yeah. And we're back to me banging on about flexibility. but I think Jim's done well here.
Yeah.
But just because it's a struggle doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Just because it's unpleasant doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It is a struggle. It is bloody hard work. Yeah, and not made any easier by the fact that most people, you know, they get on with it on their own. Yeah, they try to be very nice to the rest of us.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for your questions, and that just leaves me to say a huge thank you to you as well, Mike. Thank you.
Thank
you for taking all the questions.
Yeah. Sorry that my Zoom technique is so random.
No, not at all. Not at all. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our session. And as we mentioned, please send any questions that come up later for you. And also, if you want to find out any more about what we do at Action Bladder Cancer UK, then please get in touch as well. We're just about to put contact details up on the screen. There you go. And so it just leaves me to say a huge thank you for joining us tonight. We hope you found it informative and enjoy the rest of your evening. And please pay attention as well to our website for future webinars, because we do put them up on the website on a regular basis. All right, take care and bye for now.